Alright guys, we're here for Afreeca Freecs versus Kingzone DragonX as our second review of the night. The light mode is here, so I'm sure some people are very upset, but I'm sure some people are happy. It's kind of a trademark now. Going to be looking at Afreeca versus Kingzone game number 1. This was a weird and wonderful series that I think more people should enjoy. You can tell, LOL Event VOD's views on this match not that high. Afreeca, kind of a lot of people put out their mind after they lost some of their big names and they, definitely had a poor showing at Worlds, had a poor showing in spring season, and Kingzone are only starting to regrow their fan base with some of their big names, but also their performances. So we're getting there. In terms of this season, Freeca have not necessarily been consistent. They've had 3 out of 4 3-game series, but they lost to Griffin, took a game off them. They beat SKT and Kingzone, and they slammed Humble Life, who are right now one of our poor teams. So Afreeca's looking good. And also just with a roster that they ran maybe one game of, maybe no more in spring season. Their roster currently is Keen, Dread, Yukal, Aiming, and Senin. And I want to talk a bit about Afreeca. I'll zoom up so that this actually looks a little bit simpler to see. Okay, there we go. Now my cam's in a good spot. I really want to talk about Afreeca because I think they're kind of an underappreciated team in the present day. And their story is very interesting, but people don't know about it. Someone's messaging about stream title. I'll get to that. Change the stream title. LCK. Afreeca versus Kingzone. So, getting back to the point at hand. The Afreeca Freecs, they started off as a rebrand of Rebels Anarchy. So, Mickey was the mid laner of this team and Star under the branding. And the team at the time was Ixu in the top lane, Lyra in the jungle over in North America for a long time now, Mickey in the mid lane over in the LEC, and then Sungyun and Snowflower were the bot lane. Sungyun now on Humble Life, and Snowflower, KT Rolster, praise support. And they were the perennial 6th place team. They would always make it to 6th place, even with that roster. And after a year of that, in 2017, they actually made some big bets. So they changed a lot of their roster. Top laner was Marin, coming back from the LPL, really big star of the LCK. Spirit Jungle, so another player returning. So they were really stacking their roster. It was Kramer and Aiming in the bot lane as the AD carries, and Tucson as support. And then mid laner was Kuros. Like, it was very much a team with a strong brand, but the reality was it was kind of the players that were left over after some of the other roster shakes. Like SKT and KT kind of got their pick of the litter in 2017, and then Longzhu and Afreeca kind of picked up the other big brand players. And it was a roster that was very inconsistent, but actually had the same ceiling, amusingly, of the previous ones, in that they finished 6th 2 seasons in a row again. So they had finished 6th 4 splits in a row coming to the end of 2017. 2018, Marin left, Keen comes in, and obviously had a wonderful year. And then they finished 2nd in LCK Spring, which I think where a lot of people start on the Afreeca hype train, is they stopped finishing 5th or 6th every split. I was saying 6th, so they finished 5th a lot of splits also, which was the wild card match. They would always lose that 2-0. So that was 5th technically. So get that correct, Chris. A lot of people came to their journey when they finished 2nd in spring last year through Keen's great performances. And the storyline we created for them, or the storyline that was out there, was they were the grinders. Afreeca Freecs were a team that played a lot of League of Legends because their head coach, I Love Uve, was famous for being a grinder when he was a StarCraft Brood War legend. He is a bonjour of StarCraft Brood War. You might have only ever heard that with Faker as the bonjour of League of Legends. There's never been another one coined. But on the side of Brood War, there was multiple, and I Love Uve was a bonjour, kind of like a player that transcended metas and a general understanding of the game. He was better than that. He reinvented matchups because he was so good. And he did that from grinding. He played the most of any player around then. And that is what propelled him to his success. So when he became SK Telecom T1 StarCraft 2 coach, and going on to when he was coach of Afreeca Freecs, when he really started to kind of excel was when he started to really get the team to grind. 10-man roster, 3, 4, 5 sets of scrims, no time to solo queue because you're scrimming so much either internally or against other teams. They grinded their way to second place in LCK Spring behind Kingzone, and they also popularized the 10-man roster. They were the first team to really push and use all 10 men rather than, say, Longzhu Gaming in 2016, who didn't use their 10-man roster. So that's how they found their success, playing a lot of games. And you had to be in that team and want to do that. Otherwise, your burnout rate was going to be high. And by the time I got to Worlds, I think, one of my thoughts is not to look for an excuse. They played poorly, but I think that was also some of the grind starting to get there. And I think that actually was true in spring of this year as well. One of the reasons it's been attributed to Afreeca's level of performance being so much higher in summer than spring, speaking to Korean analysts, is that with ILoveUV stepping up, i.e. he's now no longer involved in the match day League of Legends squad. I think he's like higher in Afreeca Freecs and doing kind of more businessy stuff. Nofei has taken over identity of this team, and the team has moved away from millions of scrim box and grinding to allowing their young pros to express themselves a bit more, have a bit more fun. The whole overall atmosphere of the team is a lot more happy and jokey, and they've got a lot of mechanical talent. When they put this roster together and announced it, I actually thought that Afreeca would be a good team because I looked at the roster and I said, okay, Keen top, promising young jungler in Dread, and Spirit, who's still going to be reliable. Yukal in the mid lane, coming off a great debut year on KT. Aiming, given where all the Korean AD carries leaving, I thought he'd be like relevant as top 5, if not a star. And then support was a question mark, but that was kind of the only spot where you're like, okay, maybe we're not competitive in that role. But then Afreeca were instantly awful in summer. And the word is they were grinding scrims and trying lots of configurations and going with the best performer in scrims, and sometimes ended up being Spirit playing bot lane Morgana. And that was just completely scrim a lot. What's working in the scrims? Not a lot. Well, I guess we go with the thing that won a couple of games. And in summer, with Yukal coming back into the roster, which for whatever reason, he wasn't playing at all in spring, and this roster getting a bit of breathing room, and with Senin, of all things, with the rookie support. This is their support they only added to the roster in summer season second round robin of spring. So he didn't even start. It was Proud and Jelly as their only 2 supports. Senin came in and at the end of the day has been able to have a good level of performance. So I imagine he's just performing better than Jelly at the moment. Like this roster being at the moment, you kind of have to power rank them 1 or 2, depending on how directly you talk about kind of results, right? Like they beat Kingzone, who beat Griffin. Therefore, surely they're the best team. Is kind of a greater than chain that's not a joke, right? So given all of that chatter, I just want to implore on you that Afreeca are a very interesting team. You look at their ages, and they have Keen, who just turned 20. You have Dread as the jungle, 19. Yukal, 18 years of age. January 2001. I remember January 30, 2001. I just turned 14. Aiming is 80 carry, also 18. Turning 19 soon. And then Senin their support, 17. September 18th, 2001. He was born a week after September the 11th. So this team is super duper young, but and I think with teams that are this young, their variance is going to be very large, and it's going to take a very strong and kind of adept coaching staff to get the most out of them. And I think that there's an argument that grinding ILoveUV style works. But I think if you start losing and you still grind the most scrims of everyone and you keep losing, I think as a young player, it's pretty easy to get dissatisfied and lose a lot of kind of confidence in yourself. And I think that's just what happened with Afreeca. Like, there'd be so many games where I walk back and I see Cloud Templar, Dongjun. I'm like, what the fuck is Afreeca doing with all these random drafts and random roles? Like, what are they doing? It was a question I had. And And we all came to the same answer of like, surely playing standard with the amount of quality players you have, like you have a good roster. Like surely that has to teach you more than just splashing different ideas on the Rift, and then you win or lose. And if you win, it's like, well, you can't play Jarvan AP support again and win. So did you actually gain something from this that you can, use the next time? Probably not. Like it was very distracting. Sorry, very distressing to watch Afreeca in spring. So it's so rewarding and just relieving to see Afreeca try and keep it simple. Like they've gone with 5 players who are young but informed. They don't have a shot caller on the Rift in the traditional terms of like a young, like a 21, 25-year-old veteran who's played 3 years of pro play. No, they've got Keen, who's played 3.5 splits. He is their veteran player. They got nothing else. Spirit's not being played. They've clearly always wanted to go with Dread, which I think I saw pretty clearly from the moment they started Kesper Cup, and I'm happy his performance is finally starting to back him up. But Afreeca's just, they're a feel-good story. I hope that Afreeca can gain more fans, whether it's from me talking about them now or just the way they play, because like this is a very bold lineup and they play a very bold style and they make a lot of mistakes, but it feels honest. I like watching them because every time I play them, they make some good moves that are building upon what they did before, and then somebody makes a dumb mistake, and their mid to late game shot calling is not very good, which is the opposite of every Korean team that succeeded, where their early game didn't matter because mid to late game was so good. Afreeca's pretty bad mid to late game, but that's okay because their shot calling is not full of veteran calls. Like that's the thing they need to get better on. And you need reps. You need to play games. You need 18 best of 3s to work that stuff out. And they are. So, I don't know. I really enjoy watching Afreeca because they're good at what they should be good at and bad at what they should be bad at. But their good side is really shining this season and in the current meta they're in. Moving over to Kingzone. We already reviewed them last week. You guys know. They've generally been the best team so far this year in Korea, but at the end of the day, it's been hard to fully read who and what they are because you're always waiting for Nayeon to not be capable in the mid lane of hanging on to some harder matchups. Had no problem against Faker, so that insulates them from that. You're always ready to be like, yeah, how good are really Rascal and Kaz? Like, oh, Deft can't hard carry enough. Like, you're always looking for kind of a Kingzone fall. And look, they do lose this series, but Kingzone also make a lot of cool moves and are an active team. So you knew that Kingzone versus Afreeca was going to be something interesting. And good news, we can get straight into it. This game was nothing if not interesting. Now, we're going to have to do a little bit of hacking around. So let's get to LCK Summer 2019 Gamepedia. So from what I understand, the VODs are kept in this way because the champ select gets flagged on Games of Legends. So on LoL event VODs. So we actually lose pick ban order. So we're gonna have to actually go to the pick bans. So sorry about this. Gonna have to get our way there. Kingzone versus Afreeca Game 1. So these are the pick bans in order. I'm going to move them around so I'm not in a weird spot. There we go. Kingzone. Wait. What did I do? Oh, I went too far down. Here we go. So, Kingzone Afreeca. Afreeca on the blue side. Xayah, Sivir, and Jax bans. They really don't want Kingzone to have a strong duo first round because they're respecting Deft, right? Deft and Tucson shoulder 2 of the bans here. They don't want to deal with Xayah Rakan. They don't want to deal with Sivir Lux. They're taking away 280 carries away from Deft, which, you know what? In spring season, probably the right read, but not so much in summer season. And from there, the Jax ban is a very intriguing one. I assume it's because they want to play Aurelia and Rascal can play top lane Jax, Cuz can play jungle Jax. Like this, if you see Jax banned, it probably means someone wants to play Aurelia, is the way I think about it. The Kingzone bans, on the other hand, are a little bit suspicious. Silas for power level. Yasuo, They play at bot lane, they play at mid lane. I think that's fine. They don't want to deal with a wombo comp. Don't want to ban Gragas. The Lee Sin ban, it's a comfort pick for Dread. But this is like a next level read because Sejuani first pick is guaranteed after you see a Jax ban. You might say, but you were talking about Aurelia. Why Sejuani? Like, if you're thinking about playing Aurelia, you want to play the champion that puts the enemy, you want to pick the jungler that puts the enemy over the top, and they feel like if we get Sejuani, we're going to make our Aurelia lane way stronger. So they're definitely going to take Sejuani here. You're banning Jax to open up the chance of Aurelia, and Sejuani empowers Aurelia. So Sejuani first pick guaranteed. And quickly we saw the reasoning for that was that Kingzone wanted to return to Karthus, which of all the games to play this against, it goes against when we saw Kingzone play Karthus earlier in the season. So they played Kingzone, against Gen G in their first match. And in that game, the analysis is pretty simple of, well, Gen G don't do anything in the early game. Karthus is going to power farm because obviously he just wants to focus on his camps where possible and then press R and win. And that's how it went there. You're against Afreeca, and we've already said that Afreeca Freecs are a team that we heavily expect to brawl and play aggressively. Now, Karthus can work in that scenario, but it's definitely not, he's not a pig in a pig pen when it comes to being forced away from his camps. I love watching LS cast Karthus games because he casts Karthus games like how he plays solo queue Karthus. He is the epitome of the coup de grace, farm the jungle, rubber band perfectly, and always farm to every level as soon as it comes off to hit your item timings on point. So when in the LCK we've had C's, who's the world's biggest ganking Karthus, plays it like it's a kindred, LS is just seething about it, right? Because it's not the way that he thinks about the champion. This is the sort of game where this Karthus theoretically will have to fight way more than actually power farm his jungle, just because of the team you're against. It's only confirmed when you see all 5 champions, but on the one hand, you're saying, well, Sejuani doesn't kill Karthus very well if he catches him in an invade, therefore Karthus is going to out-skirmish at some, if it's 3v3s and 4v4s, and I think you'd be right there. But Karthus is also not going to be power farming. And the Aatrox is taken just for a bloody game. So I like the Aatrox here because I think Aatrox 2v2, 3v3 plus is super good if you're fighting a lot. But I think 1v1 is where Aatrox is not shined in the LCK. The response from Afreeca, they take Sejuani. So now they have Sejuani Aurelia, which is a true flex deal. You can run it anywhere. And then it's Nautilus for engage. So the first bot lane champion is taken by Afreeca at 3rd pick so they can ban some bot laners. They don't respect Tusin's Lux, which is very interesting. You'll notice that Yuumi is not picked or banned in this game. I know Kingzone have a much lower read on Yuumi than other teams. I believe they play it in this series, but they've been happy to leave it open and counterpick it a couple of times, so that part doesn't surprise me. And Afreeca are looking to fight a lot. And if you're going to fight a lot, you don't necessarily want Yuumi, right? Because Yuumi doesn't have pick tools. So they're just going to take the pick support and leave Yuumi up, and they don't seem too concerned that the Yuumi hasn't been taken. And then Kingzone, first round Nico. I love that Kingzone are one of the few Korean teams that first round Nico. I think super undervalued in Korea compared to China, where Nico is often first picked or early contested. It is a confidence pick for Neon. It's a wave clearer, so I think that's what they're expecting this to be. Nico mid, Aatrox top, Karthus jungle. They're basically picking for themselves here. And actually, Worldy in chat, can we appreciate how Kingzone perfectly in role order picked their champs? You're correct. From here, bans. Aiming a good Kalista player gets that banned. You cast Talia. No need to explain those. Safe bottom lane banned. Very interesting. So they ban Ezreal Tahm Kench. They're saying no Tahm Kench lane. You're going to have to actually pour resources into this. And I think the reason for this is that they really want to potentially just play through bot lane. They just want to potentially attack that lane and not allow the Karthus to either focus on farming and then topside farming. So i.e. farming your, every time your Krugs and your Raptors come off cooldown and largely hanging around top side. And then bot side doesn't have a ganking jungler that can counter gank or gank, but it doesn't matter because it's Ezreal Tahm Kench. So they try to deny that. So I don't mind that from Afreeca at all. Then the Morgana comes in, and Kingzone are the team that's played a lot of Morgana carry. And they could have gone a lot of different ways here. They get Morgana, which means that they can get a winning 2v2 against Nautilus with a lot of different AD carries, and it means they can counterpick AD carry. Already exciting. So already, with this pick here, Kingzone will win bot lane because they can counterpick AD carry. Or you can do something more creative, which is what Kingzone ends up doing. They see Varus Nautilus. If you want to win lane, you pick Varus over any other AD carry. Caitlyn's stronger in counterpick scenarios, but when you're blind, this is what you do. Varus Naut, very powerful. The Jace pick was one that caused us a lot of frustration. I'm kind of with him here. This could easily have been Ryze on the side of Afreeca, but I guess they just saw what was going on here. They weren't 100% confident in Ryze versus Nico, and they just felt like there's a lot of flex potential here, even though we really thought, they were picking an order. So the Jace was a bit of a surprise because it was very likely that this game wasn't going to be about a Jace side lane push. And then finally, Kingzone go the way of the Pike. So they've done this before. Pike with Predator is the way that Tucson likes to run it. Tucson is their Pike player. He's not Pike carry on this team. But we can now move over to the VOD and see the end result is Keen is going to go on the Aurelia top side. Now, this is a matchup that Aurelia scales into. Get the confirmation there, 20 seconds. Aatrox actually wins a lot of early trades against Aurelia. Then Aurelia straight up wins the matchup eventually. A little bit later in the piece. Definitely with items, you take Aurelia in the 1v1 hard over Aatrox, but the early trades for the Aurelia can get her in a little bit of strife. So they don't necessarily pick for the winning lane there by any means. And then Kingzone have this really intriguing draft that we'll talk more and more about as the game goes on. Handshakes come through. So we should talk more about what the drafts are and they aren't. Afreeca very heavy on physical damage. But they also have some early priority in the mid lane. It takes a little bit of a while for Neon to get the ability to push back, but it does come usually around, Lost Chapter GLP completion. And it's Ignite on the Jace to potentially look for all-in trades. Afreeca actually have two very strong lanes to gank for Sejuani. The thing that Jace does provide here that Ryze doesn't provide as much is that Jace with Ignite and Aurelia top are close to god tier lanes for Sejuani to gank, because Aurelia Sejuani is the ganking duo we've talked about, where if one CC hits, you're going to stack up that permafrost very quickly with just dashing in and all your high attack speed in the early game, and then you take down the kill from there. Jace with Ignite means that you go into hammer form when the Sejuani comes in, then you're a melee champion that can stack up the passive, and you have Ignite for kill pressure. So you actually have quite high kill pressure on both Neon and Rascal. In these lanes, the only thing you have to worry about is that if the jungler isn't there, yes, there can be some headaches for Keen in the 1v1 early against Aatrox. So that part makes sense. That is the reason I imagine they moved away from Ryze and towards Jace, was for there to be really strong gank assist in all three lanes. We're not even talking about Nautilus, who's a melee champion, and Varus, who's a CC bot. So there's a lot to work there. So this is a really strong, very high pressure team when it comes to finding lanes to gank. On the side of Kingzone, they have a jungler that usually focuses on farming, a mid laner that just wants to hang back, a bot laner that exists mostly to allow Pike to roam. It's a very high magic damage team, and then AoE damage from Aatrox and true damage from Pike. So you might sit there and say, don't these guys stack armor and these guys stack magic resist? That's a very simple way to think about it, right? The thing you need to consider, though, is a couple of things. Kingzone do a lot of burst damage. Binding, the amount of hard crowd control that is also burst damage, like the pass-through stun, the root on Neon's kit, binding and ultimate, Karthus ult, and Karthus consistent damage. They do a lot of burst magic damage, but they also have a lot of team fight winners. Suicide in the middle of the fight, Death Defied, Requiem can win team fights. Aatrox getting the first kill often wins a team fight. Pop Blossom alone can blow up a team. And Pyke can reset. So they're going for a comp here that is very strong at one item on Morgana, on Pyke, on the Nico. All these champions fight super well early. The standard Karthus build isn't a scaling build anymore. It's flat pen. So high damage on the Karthus as well. And then the Aatrox, as long as he's doing fine in the lane, can then team fight. The chances with this team that the Aatrox doesn't get the first kill is literally zero. Like, someone has to die here. Otherwise, the game is already over. You have Karthus, Nico, Morgana, Pyke. Like, someone will die. Aatrox will get an assist and then start sweeping all over the place. So to me, the only miscast champion of the 10 here is Varus. Because Varus looks at this team and there's nothing he can build to negate the threat he's against. Even Wit's End is not enough. He's got Pyke. He's got Aatrox to deal with. So, like, aiming is the one who's in hell this game. Like, this is for sure the game where you lock in your AD carry and the enemy team's Master Yi, Zed, Aurelia, Shaco, Pyke. And you're like, well, I mean, I'm not going to do anything. Like, that's how I look at aiming's Varus this game with how the draft came together. There's too much threat on the lineup of Kingzone in order for aiming to live realistically. And while we think about, man, in those standard lanes, Afreeca Freecs have great gank synergy with the Sejuani. One way to stop that is to play a high impact style. And this game from Kingzone reminded me a lot of G2's game with Pyke in a different way. And it actually fell apart way earlier in that they're all over the map, skirmishing at all moments and never making the game about, ooh, Jace is going to have a lot of gank threat with Sejuani. Ooh, Aurelia is going to have a lot of gank threat with Sejuani. Instead, it's 2v2, 3v3 at all times. And that level of high proactivity plays deeply into Dark Harvest, resets, threat, and not into, damn, these solo lanes on paper are strong. So Cousin Rascal loved to invade two-man early in the game and put down an early ward. So that's why Keen is spotted out. Deep vision versus no deep vision. So it's a spotting start for the Sejuani. And Karthus is going to take down the blue buff. Karthus is basically looking for a bonus camp here, I think, is what he's looking for. Or vertical jungling. The vertical jungling means a lot for Rascal because if you can take lots of aggressive trades as the Aatrox early, it's one of the few ways you can kind of remain relevant in the 1v1. If you're always on the back foot in the 1v1 early, you'll never get there. Aurelia will just solo kill you for days as the game goes on. So it's really important for Rascal to get any kind of start in order to get kind of relevance in the 1v1 as Aatrox versus the Aurelia. Rune-wise, we got the Rune Vomit on the screen that I'm a big fan of. We get all the information out there. Anything interesting to take away here? Ghost Power from the Nautilus to have a... That's actually Zombie Ward, not Ghost Power. Ingenious Hunter on 3 champions. That's pretty cool. So this tells you already knew with the Twin Shadows, but Ingenious Hunter for more access to actives, so you get more value out of Twin Shadows and out of the slowing abilities, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what the build is about. It's about getting value out of GOP and Twin Shadows. And then Ingenious Hunter on the Pyke for something like for any of his lethality items, because they all have actives. Having active cooldown reduction there is pretty big. The Karthus going Ravenous Hunter is, it's kind of a style choice. It's not Last Stand anymore. This is the I'm going to farm my jungle build, more the coup de grace, I guess. Otherwise, pretty standard. Last Stand, interestingly, The double last stand here would have made for some pretty epic 1v1s. Legends Bloodline on Aurelia. I'm not actually that familiar with where Aurelia goes in the precision tree, so I don't know how normal this is, but it seems non-standard because Bloodline isn't taken by a lot of pro players. Taste the Blood only on the Morgana and the Jace. Otherwise, pretty standard. So Cuz does 3 camp clear bot side and then comes to fight for his blue as well. So it's very hard to get too much against a Karthus jungle just because of the speed of his farming. He already has 3 camps compared to the 1. And then the question is, you get to this moment, and both teams opt into fighting. Which already, if you're watching this game, you're like, okay, well, in the LCK, how often do they actually full-on team collapse for the objective at 2 minutes? Not that often. But we do see it happening here. With level 2s everywhere. Now, are they giving up a minion wave in the bot lane? They give away a minion, but that's all. Kind of interesting to work out who is the stronger of the teams here with the information that's available. Tusson's walking up. The vision advantage is on Kingzone's side. So I give Kingzone the lead in this particular case. They also have, I imagine, the AoE root skilled already from Neon. Yukal can all in. Doesn't provide too much else here. Afreeca have the early start, but they don't have the vision to stick a play like this. So I don't actually mind the contest. It also should be noted that the blue buff is pretty low patience. So even threatening an all-in here will get a blue buff reset. And another reason that advantages Kingzone is if the patience bar resets, you can't just give up multiple minion waves in side lanes in order to invade for a blue. Afreeca will disengage off of a blue buff reset much faster than Kingzone will, because Kingzone can just go and do the Gromp, and eventually normalcy reigns and you get your own blue buffs. So I think Kingzone are actually making the smart call here to call in some ways. Like, it feels like Afreeca are bluffing and Kingzone are calling when it goes for this defense, because more often than not, you chase Afreeca out of the jungle. This is really nicely done. So in a fight like this, where you see action super early in the game, it's so easy to say Fiesta, but it's that Kingzone make the right move of, this is one we can fight for. The enemy's team's levels and items don't necessarily ward us off, and specifically, with the patience bar where it's at, we can fight for blue buff. More often than not, we'll get the blue buff, and if we get a sick pick, like the binding coming in from Deft, we'll get a kill as well. So defender's advantage, you're fighting on enemy territory without deep wards, you don't see Tucson, you can't poke Deft over the wall. Any moments here, you have to disengage first. So Afreeca like, oh yeah, no harm, no foul. Well, guess what? Binding has a big range. You're taken down. That was nicely done by Kingzone. That was a pretty controlled decision to fight there. And we're going to have a lot of these things to evaluate. I'm going to need you guys to keep me honest, because we're going to have this game into G2 versus Vitality as our last review. Not every decision to fight is going to be the correct one. But we need to learn more about when and how to fight, because we're in a region, specifically LCK, where there isn't enough fighting. So if you hear me say this was a smart fight and you don't agree, get in the chat and be loud about it, because we're learning together. Korea's trying to redefine themselves, and this is very much Korea. These are the 2 teams from Korea that are going to get into the mud and mud wrestle you. There was an interview with Dread after this series that Afreeca goes on to win. And he literally says, I take all of my inspiration from the LPL. I try to play like an LPL jungler, which you could have told based on his solo queue and based on spring season. But with the changes in their coaching staff, we're actually seeing the value out of playing that more proactive, aggressive style. Cuz is many camps ahead. As we can see, it's going on to the Mountain Drake. Now, they got all of the wards here. So, Kingzone are doing this correct. They're starting up this Drake with lots of control vision and a pushing lane. And a roam over. So, good Mountain Drake start, definitely. Right off spawn as well. Afreeca come to contest, which is pretty risky, right? Dread leads with his face. But where does it go wrong? Because there's 2 cleanup kills, right? Let's watch the mini-map here. Because to this point, like, Dread is pretty bold walking up. Tucson's walked over. There's 3 members here. They have no vision in the area apart from just seeing the health bar. Let's watch how this goes. Dread is solo contesting it. Morgana walking up. Trying to go for a smite steal. Pretty bold. But Cuz is super low. And seeing the health bar there and the mana bar on Cuz might be what further incentivizes this, because Neon is level 5, doesn't have any control apart from 1 route. Cuz... hold on 1 second. Thought I was going to sneeze. Cuz has no way to fight unless he dies, so he almost is incentivized to go in his passive. And Morgana, if you notice in the bottom right, will react second. She tried to cut off the duo of Nautilus and Varus, quickly realized she couldn't do that. So now you just have level 5 Jace coming in and the bot lane coming in to contest. There will be a small numbers advantage here for Afreeca in terms of rotating first. I feel like this was Yukal knowing how strong Ignite Jace is and like making a really powerful collapse. So Cuz, like, the start here from Cuz is all looking so good, but because he has to invest all of his mana to do this, it ends up just being that Dread being there is enough. They should have backed off. So even though our initial impression is, all right, great Drake start, that actually ends up being a cost because it's so early and the fights don't happen in the LCK that we're not used to Cuz basically being completely a non-factor just to take the Drake, and not Infernal, but Ignite Jace being so strong. How did King get a level lead? How did King get this far ahead in CS? I kind of want to watch the mini-map here to understand this, because in the game this happened as well. We're even, right? Let's watch the top lane wave. This is a very relevant part of the game that you couldn't see at 1x speed during the game. Let's watch minion wave topside and understand how possibly things went so bad. Keen got a freeze, and Aatrox didn't feel strong enough to contest it. Level 5 to level 5. Dread is spotted on a ward, and Rascal still... he's still full health. I'm watching Rascal's health bar to see if he's stunned or takes a bad trade. He doesn't. He's threatening a teleport, backs back into lane, so he's not out of lane enough to actually lose a lot. Now the minion wave's back in a more even spot in the lane. Did we miss something? So, okay. It actually happened earlier than this because the minion wave size is so big. So I believe what happened was, around this point, Rascal fast pushed a wave, and Keen was able to set up a freeze on his turn here that actually, because you count the minions here, Keen is up. Let's assume Rascal gets that CS, he'll have 29, but Keen will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 minions alive. So he's actually, at this point, up 10 if he gets all of that CS. And the reason why Rascal can't allow a lane state like this to freeze is that if you look at the minions, there's like a minion that's 1 HP, there's minions that are different levels of HP here. If Keen gets a freeze on his side after 5 minutes, that's prepped like this, it's so easy for him to get full stacks of his passive, have multiple different minions to surf forward and back in, and to look for an all-in onto Rascal. So this is the sort of thing that only on the review you can notice. Like this CS here that Array will almost always take 100% of is also going to freeze near his turret, so in dangerous territory based on how top lane is played. But also, it's very trivial for him to build up his passive on this wave and choose for an all-in because the enemy's like stressed about the lane spots. So this is really good lane management from Keen that Rascal will have a lot of trouble resetting if he tries to just queue in wantonly, he's going to get all in with full passive stacks of Aurelia really hard. And that's why, as we're watching things like Drake fight happen, Roscoe's playing so scared. He's playing off the minion wave for so much of this game. Like, you can see the red circle and the little blue circles. Like, the minion wave is way behind the Aurelia, but because Aurelia has built it so slowly and had it freezing on her side, it's a scenario where she's had control and zoned Roscoe out of a bit of experience, and then gets this. When does he hit 6? Level 5 right now. Level 6 now. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So level 6 for a few seconds here, and Roscoe's pretty far up. And gets all in, so has to use flash. So really good minion wave management there. We don't have pro view in order to show specifically that lane. But I think it's really interesting because Keen is winning a counter matchup. Like, Aatrox is actually stronger than Aurelia early. You're supposed to need levels on Aurelia before you counter the Aatrox. Again, it's a early game priority Aatrox, early game trades Aatrox, Aurelia eventually. There was no eventually. Keen's just winning this from basically moment 1, which is huge for Afreeca in this game. It's a good teleport coming in from Aatrox. LS thinks of it as a bizarre one, but it's purely to guarantee. The reason why you need to do this teleport is what information. At this point, watch the invade. Jace is just pushing out a minion wave. The next one's coming. As Cuz walks in, it's after he starts it, he already is like, all right, is Jace coming? Is Aurelia coming? I have no idea what's going on. He puts up the wall to spot Jace if Jace chooses to walk over. Jace stays on the minion wave. And Aatrox is teleporting near his top lane and just allowing Cuz to get 2 camps and get out. Very often when you go for these repeat invades on blue buffs, you don't get the Gromp as well because it's too risky to take the enemy blue, add a timer that's available to the enemy team, and then take the Gromp as well. Because so often you just die on the Gromp. And then it's like, well, I came for the blue, and then I died on the Gromp. Like, that's pretty stupid. So the TP there actually allows him to get 2 camps, and it's clear that Roscoe was teleporting to lane anyway. So I actually really like the teleport from Roscoe to back up Cuz's invade. Allow him to stay pretty ahead in terms of jungle CS. This wave is still in a bad spot for Roscoe. He wants to freeze it here. We'll see if he... I very much doubt he'll get the ability to freeze it. Yeah. See, Keen will never give him the freeze option that Roscoe got on the other side. Very interesting 1v1. Yeah, for some reason, analysis is a not allowed word in the chat. I imagine because the first 4 letters make a naughty word. So please find creative ways to convey that idea. How'd this start in the mid lane? Neon's really low on mana, probably on a back timing. That's why Yukal feels pretty strong to walk up here and knows a full rotation would kill. Riverside control to Kingzone, that's why Tucson comes up first, and then a control ward to the side of Afreeca is why the death doesn't come in, so another good set of roams. Keen is so strong already in this game. So Kingzone at this point, like, already are thinking about ways to bail Roscoe out of lane. Maybe you have to wait to post 14 minutes to do so because you don't want to give Aurelia turret plates, but already this 1v1 is never going to be the way you win. You're going to have to team fight smart and often. And like we mentioned, they've picked a comp exactly for that. So there's definitely good news perhaps coming later, but the 1v1's gone way worse than expected. We talked in the past when Bang and Effort played a lot of Morgana and Pyke. The Morgana carry works in these cases because it allows Pyke to roam. It's why Tucson takes the Predator to make his roams even more deadly. Should be noted that the best time to roam is when you're on your natural back timings. We always see supports around level 5, 6 back and walk near the mid lane in order to put down wards like we did in our first review. But after that kind of initial offset when neither support is in lane, after 10 minutes for the Morgana, because then Morgana always has a lane spot to be in. You definitely need the stopwatch to be enabled in order to be completely unable to be turret dived. So because of that, you want to wait until stopwatch is up, and then Tucson's kind of free to roam the map. Good counter gank spot here by Cuz. And then the first whoopsie of the game. This is the Papa Sax moment. So this is really good pathing by Cuz. He's there for a counter gank. The reason why you know there's going to be a fight here is that Keen has spent the entire laning phase protecting a freeze and then punishing a freeze. So we already talked about how for 9 minutes he's like spanked Rascal's behind again and again with like, I'm freezing now, you can't come up. Also, you don't get a freeze, I got full passive stacks. Like, he's owned Rascal in the 1v1 here. So it's actually, you know for sure Keen is going to all in here, just try to set up something like a freeze. He's going to brawl for sure, and that's why it's a great time to come in. 1 Q hits. Next Q hits. That's really good accuracy on Cuz, right? And then at this point, you back away. What's up on Cuz? He's got flash up. His ultimate, obviously, as we know, is up. And then he just fat fingers. He fat fingers ultimate, basically in enemy turret range, and just goes down here. There's always a chance we're giving him too much credit, and he legit thought there was no way Sejuani could be on the top side and he'd get away with an ult there. When was stun used? Let's find out. So stun is used around 9:43. If stun is used a second time here, the Karthus ultimate may be fine. See, this is the reason why, right? Like, we're 11 seconds after stun was used. It's available clearly. It's being used right now. There's never a chance that this is going to get completely cast, and he's not in kill range. Look at him. He's got he's got 420 health, and Karthus' ult was just nerfed. So there's just no way that Karthus ult could be intentional here. Like, it has to be a fat finger. Sejuani happens to be there as well. And it's really good from Dread. We should actually watch what Dread's view of this was. Dread is coming to top side, either to start the Rift Herald or to protect his top laner with a ward. But Dread is far away when this play starts. Neon's roaming up, but he's roaming up the safe way. They got river control, and it looks like he's going to back away. Dread just runs as fast as possible and gets there at the perfect time, right? Poor mistake from Cuz, because he started off with a really smart counter gank and then obviously made a really idiotic move. That loses Kingzone a lot. Because now, they were already like losing the 1v1 super hard top and there's outscale, and now Aurelia may not have got a kill, but Aurelia's now 2 assists on top of, again, getting a preferential reset timer. So top lane is lost, is what I would be saying if I'm Rascal here. We need to find a way to get our Predator Pyke and fight, and damned for the consequences. We're after 10 minutes, so like we mentioned, you can start roaming on the Pyke. He pops the Predator in vision. He's walking up to contest the Rift Herald. Rift Herald is a place where both teams desperately want to fight. Both teams need the gold injection early. So it does allow Kingzone to get a fight. And we know that we've already mentioned they don't want standard lanes anymore after their botch. Reset on the Rift Herald. This is good news for Kingzone because they were slow to roam up, and now they can actually get everyone in order. And Kingzone is saying no objectives without team fights unless it's in the top lane, because I think they have to give those up. TP coming in. Sejuani not going to be there. I'm going to watch this slower. let's also, at this point, because we start breaking into team fights every second, consider the question of who do team fights benefit more, Afreeca or Kingzone? And we already talked about how Kingzone have lost the 1v1 top side, have gone for a team fight AoE wombo reset comp. They want to be team fighting as much as possible, and maybe there are chances of laning. Maybe their laning phase has to be over at 11 minutes is realistic for them. Afreeca would love Keen dunking on Rascal in the top lane. Aiming and Sennen, they may be frustrated by Morgana and not be able to kill her, but they'll get turret plates against her because she can't kill minion waves fast enough. Team fights are heavily biased in terms of do we need them to Kingzone, and they're kind of a luxury from the side of Afreeca. Five v four. Naam plops him. So it's a 4-4-3 on the side of Kingzone, and it ingests more gold and also turret plates into the game from a Kingzone perspective. So they take a preferential fight that they win on a comp that wants to inject gold as much as possible and who want to fight as much as possible. The clear reason for that is something like the Karthus, right? Who always wants to pick up the stacks wherever possible. But it's actually more than that. It's also, if you get 4 or 5 kills and get Ingenious Hunter cooldown reduction, like all of the red trees picking up Ravenous and Ingenious Hunter, which is 4 out of the 5 champions on Kingzone, is going to be more and more useful in future fights. And given that the comp can only fight, I do like the tack Kingzone said to sack the lanes and fight aplenty. Speaking of fights, I really, really like this fight. Because look at, like, consider aiming. We already said he had the shut and throw to game where there's so many different things that can attack him. He's trying to hug the back of the pit and he sees Tucson and wants to turn on him. But his flash is up, but it's like they're being surrounded by a firing squad in a position that is so, like, if you could proactively flash, I think you have to flash upwards towards Dread earlier than they've done that so far. They're trying to kite topside, but the moment that Tucson gets the first kill, he can just play backline and just weave in and out, which is just sick. Like, it looks sick, absolutely, when you're watching it. He tries to ult onto Dread for gap close to continue fighting as well. But I really love how Kingzone played this one. The surround here. Like, surrounds don't happen in League of Legends that often. But the surround was super well played by Kingzone. And then they kind of just inted it away. Musical chairs between deft and aiming. Black Shield just timing out to pick up the kill here. So Kingzone's fallback from the team fight was actually pretty poor, and I like that Afreeca punished them there. But their actual team fight was good. Rascal. This is actually well played by Rascal. So Rascal with no backup topside and half health, just with ult. Comes to contest it. The flash away from the stun is what gets the first kill. Really well played by him here. These are little salvaging moments that won't salvage as 1v1, but it's already been a bloody game. Like, it has to be about team fights. So hard to watch these quick. Because at this point, Keen is frustrated because he can easily slam anyone in a 1v1. He gets caught up in this case. Yukal's roam first, gets them the first kill this. The Aatrox finally does go down. But there's so many people tracking it and coming back. So like, there's 2 answering kills from the first roam from Afreeca, and then further kills from Kingzone. Because every champion that shows up late from Kingzone is a teamfight champion. Because that's all they have. They legit only have teamfight champions. And they're also just being able to move across the map so damn fast. I think everyone has like 5 stacks of Ingenious Hunter already on this. Another challenger approach is a good one from John Feast. It does feel like Kingzone for sure are the people who put down their quarter at the Street Fighter machine and like made it very clear they were getting next dibs on the next fight, because they're always there to be the extra on top of team fights. And even though Afreeca in some ways have found smart times to come back and fight back against them, Kingzone comped for this, right? And just moments like this are so cool. Like, Tucson plays his first fight, even though he's on a ward, in a really good spot, and uses the last one for gap close and misses because Sejuani never gets in range. The inting in here, this is where Kingzone was too bold. You know, this is very much, well, I can't go back to lane. I'm level 9 Aatrox. Let's just team fight. And this is not the right call here by any means. But then the further play around the Rift Herald was good. Kingzone at this point in comms should be saying there is no fight around an objective that we want that we shouldn't be taking. We should take any team fight around objectives that we value. These games are played on Saturday, by the way. Saturday, Korean Standard Time. Rift Herald charge. They had 1 deep ward, try to make a post 14-minute Rift Herald play, but it doesn't lead to too much. Freeca are in a good spot in terms of map control. They really want this game to be predictable in the lane Varus is in. We always talk about kind of control wards on both sides and allow Varus to walk up and siege. There's so many different engage threats that he's never going to be that safe. This is the closest we'll get to, where you have control ward, control ward, control ward. This allows Varus to push a minion wave in the middle of the lane. It doesn't necessarily mean he's safe auto-attacking the enemy turret. He's not under huge risk because it's a lot of control ward vision, but he's, you know, he can't see that. He can't see that. This person has Predator. There's no enemy AD carry. Like, the responsibility of him to stay safe in this game is a pretty big headache for aiming. 24 kills in 15 minutes. Yeah, that's the kind of game this was. And I think it's because Kingzone were really happy to accelerate the pace, and Afreeca, as one of our more aggressive teams that take the inspiration from the LPL, are just doing what they know, which is to continue to fight. I think if Afreeca had veterans, they would have opted into less fights than they have already. Like, is a post 14-minute Rift Herald worth fighting for? Is always a swingy thing. Pre 14 minutes, I think you do fight. After 14 minutes, maybe not. And Kingzone, where they're going, they're leaving vision. If you notice, Afreeca is coming down bot side to try to fight, and they do have some vision down to control wards, but Kingzone's already in position to get picks, and they've laid down the vision as they walked. So that means the only person out of position here is Keen, who is trying to get to his teammates, of which there's 4, yet their river control is nil, and Kingzone have so many pick tools that you can make this rotation against Karma Caitlyn perhaps, but against Morg Pike, it's just too bold. Like, for both their teams' approaches to how they got to the Mountain Drake, they made some sense. Only Keen was out of position, but there's no veteran shot caller on Afreeca to say, hey, Keen, go the long way. You know, we don't know where they are. They didn't have that info there, and Keen just goes down. And Keen's flash on cooldown as well. The double mountain here is really big for Kingzone because they have very good Baron turn, but their Baron speed was on the lower side. Only Karthus does real Baron damage. Aatrox and Nika can help, but they're not S tier by any means. The double mountain for Kingzone is pretty big. Because I got double mountain with top lane losing as hard as he did, which is kind of unlikely to happen. Usually when your top lane is getting slammed and the enemy has a TP advantage, you're not going to also pick up a Drake advantage. Because Keen didn't even need help to get leads. He was already ahead. It's now 3 deaths though. So very much the kill score here falling apart. In games like this, where the action and the kills are so kill a minute, you always have to say, what is the next objective that Kingzone and Afreeca are fighting for, and who has the better setup around that objective? Kingzone pushes in, they bail out a bot side, they have a TP advantage because they have 3 TPs up on their team compared to 2. So it's very hard for them to be out of position. And they don't want to play around enemy vision, so they just go and brute force down the lane onto this top lane turret. And Afreeca are going to have to invest a lot to defend it. So far, Afreeca are saying, we want to fight here. And so Kingzone are saying, we want to fight here. And Afreeca's trying to RSVP to those same fights. And with cooldowns, there's just no way to defend this. So what I'm saying is that someone like Dread from this point onwards, from 2015 onwards, he doesn't achieve anything as Sejuani. The turret is so low that Kingzone don't have to walk around in order to take this objective. So to spend all of this time camping around the turret, which now dies, he spent 30 seconds of his time trying to defend a play that was indefensible. Like, it's a 2 auto turret that doesn't require a turret dive to take. The best you're going to see is Neon, like, popping his ultimate to try to zone away from the turret. So that the chance of Sejuani being involved in that passage of play is almost always 0. Meanwhile, if you look at what the enemy jungler does, Cuz knows it's very likely they'll be able to take the turret on the next push. He just stands in counter gank range. He knows he's only going to be needed for a counter gank. He's only shadowing the Neon pushing the turret. So this is where Kingzone's macro around taking turrets and getting objectives is better than Afreeca's. And in such an even game, 1 kill between the two, a lot of gold. We have 75,000 gold in this game at 21 minutes because of all the kills. Macro and decision-making and shot calling can actually separate 2 really talented teams from making inroads. Tucson walks in, takes over red side jungle. That's enough to pull Aurelia to the top side to walk up. Aatrox chooses to back away, though. Control wards, this game. So interesting. So many control wards in the inventory of Kingzone all the time. And the reason for that isn't just wards save lives. It's wards kill enemies is actually what Kingzone are looking to do. Remember, they're always looking to fight over the objective they want on their terms. So you kind of need 5 control wards if you have 5 pick champions. Because those pick champions are always going to be in position to get a pick if they bring a control ward with them. How'd this play start? So Yukar was just chasing Tucson ostensibly, and this one just dies straight up. So does Pyke even... So Pyke doesn't have a control ward. Where was Tucson? He's camping the brush. He doesn't have a control ward to put down. And just gets caught by Yukar because he didn't have river vision here. So instantly dies, because such is Pyke. Very, very squishy. Good Sejuani ultimate. They get 2 kills. And then it's 5v3 with Baron up. And if Afreeca get Baron, then they can just make this game into a 1-4 where Aurelia was already beating Aatrox and then Varus has Siege Baron. Now, Kingzone have 2 AoE ults up and also Aatrox ult up. So the problem that happens here for Afreeca is baiting the Baron here is correct, but when to pull away is actually earlier than they realize. At this point, they're like, we're starting Baron. They actually have to start disengaging Baron now, which feels terrible 5v3. But their only option to stay on Baron is try to kite out from line skill shots and go behind the pit. So they're taking increased Baron damage. They're taking so many stacks of the Baron. If you look over here, they're taking ramping magic damage because every extra Baron spit is bigger magic damage against 2 AoE wombo mages. Like, it's stacking up further and further for them in the back of the pit. And one Aatrox passive. You know, one Aatrox kill for Aatrox is just going to mean that Rascal doesn't have to care anything. If they want to put Black Shield on them, they can. They've got wombo tools. Afreeca were just like lusting for a Baron that would have won them the game, but was no right for them to pick up. And they just end up dying here. Like, you know exactly why they wanted Baron, and the Baron would probably have won the game. It would have been very big Baron buff power play for them. Like, look at the map. They've only taken out a top lane turret. They've got Varus, Jace, Siege, plus Aurelia split push while it's winning. I get why you're greedy, but again, it's where shot calling is lacking from this lineup. You have to pull off that Baron. It will be your death. Free Baron now to Kingzone. This state just changed. Sorry. The moment you realize all the ults are up with 2 AoE wombo ults, you can't kite upwards behind the pit against this team. That literally is a team fight team. Yes, there's 5 of you and 3 of them, but you used a lot to get your 2 kills. And nobody of the 3 used anything. Out of turret. Now Aatrox can side lane, something that would have been impossible if it just did a Aurelia matchup. Nice Sejuani spot, flank spot. Here from Dread, goes in on the mid lane. They get Neon super low. This is actually a really good engage timer to try to abate what was going to be the split push, but then we get this fight. It's cool to watch in replay. Neon has stasis up. Dread gets bound. And with all the different burst tools we talked about and how it's a reset team, even though you couldn't have come for a better engage spot, it still doesn't matter because of team comp advantage here. Kingzone have god tier team fight comp. Whoa. I got a Caps host just before G2, huh? Okay. Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much to Caps. Finishing off our second review of the night. Going to get to G2 right after this, so going to have a G2 review before too long. But holy moly, this game went to 11 super fast the moment that Kingzone can make it about them. Again, Dread is not spotted here on this engage, and it's a perfect engage to get the first pop, but the moment that Stasis arms, they can't stack CC. The turn here is just disgusting. Full health Sejuani gets ulted by everything. Aatrox gets a reset. Pyke gets a reset. There's no counterplay to a comp like this. Really cool comp idea from Kingzone to keep doing different things. And now Kingzone, from the mid-game onwards with a 5,000 gold lead, like the degree and the speed to which this game turned really reminds me of especially the first time SKT vs G2 had the Pyke game, where Pyke had a lot of struggles in laning against all the Elise dives, and then at that point onwards was just able to fully get back into the game and take the enemy down. In that Pyke game, like after all the Elise dives, Pyke was way behind, but then chaos was created and Pyke reset. And while this is a Pyke support, it kind of is and it isn't, because it's a Morgana carry. So it's not like the Pyke is there to do anything other than win team fights. And while Kingzone, like we outlined in draft, have a lot of wombo magic damage that theoretically could be itemized against, you can't build magic resist and get your core damage items as Jace, Aurelia, Varus. So on a support income, Nautilus doesn't have a lot. Sejuani stacked a lot of magic resist. Turns out, still takes a lot of damage from Aatrox and still gets womboed by Pyke. If you have this much burst damage of one type, plus a reset champion of another type, plus true damage resets, actually, until late game with 5 stasis or 6 items, you just don't have enough tankiness. So I just take the point that Kingzone were really smart about finding a way to actually open up advantages. And then from there, like the first fight, the moment that Pyke comp gets the kills, as we remember in the G2 series, the gold is shared, the gold lead is massive. Think about how at 10 minutes, it seems so likely this game would be Aurelia way ahead of Aatrox. Aurelia's going to slam down in the 1 lane. Or as Afreeca being like, we got 5 members. If we just get this Baron, Aurelia's going to win and we're going to siege these guys to death. That feels like distant memories now with how much Kingzone were able to take down. And leaving all this vision on the map, there's control wards everywhere, but how do you stop a fight from being initiated? Like, you look at this, and Afreeca know they have to try to wait out Baron. It's got 30 seconds left. You're against invisibility, double glacial augment, and also Predator Pyke. So it's funny how they assume they're fighting it, but just Twin Shadows glacial augment means they have to fight. There's no way out. It gets double GLP, double glacial augment, Pyke, Nico. Like, consider where they should, like, at this point, you're just there, and Afreeca, you're like, we're going to have to wave clear. 30 seconds, guys. Don't look for a fight. Aurelia's coming from base. And then everything's fine. They're not, nobody's over here disrespecting, you know, the Infernal Chains or Pyke Bone Skewer. There's no warning notification here of Predator. There's no warning notification here of the Pyke being invisible. There's nothing. They feel like they're safe, right? They think they're being respectful. And the moment this happens, the first Twin Shadows, and amusingly, it's actually popped out of range. If you look at if you're not sure who it is, it's actually Deft's Twin Shadows. Let's wait for it to be pressed. Like, they're screwed here, where Twin Shadows is actually peeking around the corner. Sejuani's already thinking about disengaging. Yukal's trying to clean this wave together with this person, and yet they're donezo. Like, they don't even know how donezo they are at that moment. Because the Twin Shadow comes in. Slowing field, in case you guys aren't aware of what Glacial Augment is, it means the first slow leads to another slowing field. Another slowing field because the GLP hits. More CCs hit. No one's playing any League of Legends. Actually, the Pyke being flashed out was pretty big for Senon because one reset champion doesn't get a reset. But Rascal does. And then Neon front doors like a boss while Karthasol comes in. And no one on Kingzone is someone who has to care about their positioning. It's no AD carry. Morgana's diving in knowing that crowd control is enough. Rascal's just trying to maximize damage and chase whoever he can. He doesn't have to worry about dying. He's got his blood well. Like, it's so straightforward to front door through with the Dregs of the Baron buff when you have a comp like this. And it's why Kingzone's comp was just so cool. Like, the disengage attempt was really good from the side of Afreeca, and yet, when it's double Glacial Augment, Nico, Morgana, Pyke, and Aatrox, it still wasn't enough. Oop. It was going to be a 3-game series, too. Atlas and LS there. It does end up being a 3-game series. This was a really, really cool game where it definitely wasn't perfect on both sides, but I feel like Kingzone, wherever they went, was saying, we've got the team fight comp. We can't standard lane because of what's happened earlier. how do we get what we want? We walk up with 5 control wards and fight, and we've got a team fight comp. And I think they were always playing that in their head mentally. Meanwhile, the team of Afreeca, who still made some good inroads, had some good counter punches as well, were very game to fight, even when the fight wasn't their best thing. After Aurelia went as far ahead as she did, it was almost always right for Kingzone to sack lane and team fight. Meanwhile, Afreeca had a lot of lane leads they could have tried to play through the lane. Instead, they would pack up and team fight. And that seems to be the type of team they are. I think they will be a team that gets baited to fight more than other LCK teams, but probably just normal by LPL standards. And with that in mind, Afreeca misplayed around some areas, and Kingzone made some really good engagements while always having the control ward lead. And that just meant that Kingzone was slightly the better team. Now, it should be worth noting that from this point onwards, just to finish off before we go to our second VOD review of the night after a break, Kingzone actually lose this series. Afreeca come back in game number 2 and are able to, through Yukal's Talia, to have a really nice game here. Kingzone go for a Sona comp, but it's not one of the basic Sona comps, and just end up over-fighting before they're ready for it, and Afreeca take them down. And then from there, Afreeca actually close out the series in a really good game. Like, this was a really strong overall showing from Afreeca Freecs, where they actually were the ones to choose the right aggressive moves, and there wasn't the same teamfight wombo comp from Kingzone to make it as straightforward. The jungle difference here was a big reason, as the Urgot never got going. Like, they basically took over Kingzone's jungle and never abated in game number 2, and then closed out in smart fashion in game number 3 as well. Another Yuumi Ezreal lane that, Yuumi was picked, and then a strong Varus Lux lane was picked, and then they got no value out of the Yuumi Ezreal really in this lane. So it ended up being an Afreeca win overall. So I think I don't want you to come away from this series down on Afreeca. Like, again, it feels like Afreeca are ready and primed to go in this meta. I guess we do see in game number 1, the game we chose to VOD review, kind of the thesis statement that I'd have if I'm facing Afreeca next week of they're probably always going to fight, even if it's not the smartest thing for them to do. So if we're smarter about choosing when and where to fight, we should win more often than not. So there's maybe one thesis statement that people could try against the Afreeca Freecs. But overall, really cool first game. A show of what the LCK could be if they took a couple more inroads and teams don't pick teamfight comps and then lose lanes and then farm out and never get to teamfight. Like, Kingzone here were the opposite of most LCK teams. Most LCK teams pick a teamfight comp, lose lanes, and then pick their teamfight when they lose the inhibitor turrets, Nexus turrets, and then the fight doesn't matter. They're 10,000 gold behind. Kingzone said, well, what can we do? Let's just start doing that, and we don't care about a laning phase. And that ended up being the big reason they were able to pick up the game number 1 victory. All right, guys, going to take a short break. Thank you to all the new people that are tuning in. I know there's still some people left over from tuning in from Caps' stream, so thank you to Caps for the host. Going to take a bathroom break, tweet out. You guys asked for G2 versus Vitality, so this is actually a great time to join in because last review of the night is LEC, baby. G2 versus Vitality. We're going to have some memes. We're going to have some claps. We're going to have some craps. We're going to have everything coming back in just a few minutes.